Picture the most magnificent building human beings have ever constructed for the purpose of showing off. Now fill it with 10,000 people who have nowhere to sleep. Add corridors that smell like a public latrine, staircases where courtiers relieve themselves behind the statues, fleas in the silk upholstery, rats in the walls of the Hall of Mirrors, and one elderly king whose bedtime is a religious ceremony, attended by 100 grown men fighting over who gets to hold his candlestick. That's Versailles in 1715. The glittering centre of the civilized world, the most crowded, freezing, reeking, sleep-deprived palace in Europe, a place where a duke would trade his family honour for the privilege of watching another man put on a nightshirt, and where the servant who carried that nightshirt slept on a plank in a hallway, if he slept at all. We're going back there tonight, not as tourists gawking at the gold leaf and the fountains. We're living it. One servant, one autumn, in the last year of the Sun King's life. Everything he would have seen, smelled, carried, feared, and survived. So, I make these history stories, and honestly, I have no clue if anyone actually sleeps to them, or if you're all just weirdos who like hearing about chamber pots in the halls of the grandest palace on earth. Either way, subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. Here we go. It is 2 hours past midnight, and if you fall asleep now, you lose everything. That's the whole problem of your life, compressed into one sentence. You're 17 years old. You have been awake for 21 hours. Your feet have swollen inside your shoes so that you can feel your own heartbeat in your toes, and you're standing in a stone corridor in the north wing of the Château de Versailles, holding a brass candlestick that must not go out. You're waiting for a door to open. The door belongs to Monsieur Blouin's under-valet, a man named Thévenot, and when Thévenot comes out of that door, he will either hand you a folded note to carry across the palace, or he will look at you, notice the way your eyelids are sliding down like wet paper, and report you. And if you are reported for sleeping on duty twice in one season, you are finished. Not beaten. Not fined. Finished. Sent back down the road to your village near Chartres with a canvas sack and no letter of character, which in this world is a kind of death that just takes longer. So you do what you've learned to do. You press the knuckle of your thumb into the corner of your eye until it hurts. You shift your weight from one burning foot to the other. You bite the inside of your cheek gently in the spot that is already raw from 3 months of this exact trick. The corridor is cold, not cool, cold. It is October, and the fires in this part of the palace were allowed to die at midnight because firewood is counted, and the count is checked, and a servant who burns wood after hours to warm his own worthless body is a thief. The cold comes up through the marble floor, through the soles of your shoes, up your shin bones, and settles behind your knees like a pair of iron hands. Your breath makes a small ghost in front of your face every time you exhale. The candle flame leans and shivers in the draught that lives permanently in this corridor, a draught that comes from nowhere and everywhere. Because Versailles, the most expensive building in the history of the world, does not have a single door or window that actually fits its frame. You can hear the palace around you. That's the strange thing nobody tells you before you come here. From the outside at night, Versailles looks like a sleeping mountain of stone. From the inside, it never sleeps. It rustles. Somewhere above you, through the ceiling, a floorboard creaks, then creaks again in the rhythm of a person pacing. Somewhere down the corridor, behind one of the 40 identical doors, a woman is coughing, has been coughing for an hour, a wet, tearing cough that makes your own chest hurt in sympathy. There is the scratch and scurry of rats inside the wall to your left, moving through the hollow spaces like blood through veins. And underneath all of it, so constant you stopped hearing it weeks ago, the sound of water. The fountains outside were shut off hours ago. They only run when the king walks past them, but the pipes still tick and gurgle and groan in the walls, a whole hidden circulatory system slowly dripping itself apart. And the smell. You have to understand the smell because everything at Versailles begins with it. This corridor smells of cold candle grease and mouse droppings. That's the base note. On top of that, tonight, there is the smell of the full chamber pot that someone has set outside the third door down, waiting for a servant lower than you to collect it in the morning. On top of that, a thread of stale perfume, ambergris and orange water, left hanging in the air by some courtier who passed through an hour ago on the way to a bed that probably isn't his own. And underneath everything, always, the smell of the palace itself, which is the smell of 500 fireplaces worth of old smoke soaked into stone, plus damp plaster, plus the sourness of thousands of human bodies packed into a building with no drains, no bathing rooms worth the name, and courtyards where the servants empty what needs. Empty against the walls at dawn. The most beautiful place on earth, that's what they call it. And they're right, which is the part that breaks your brain a little. Because this same reeking corridor, if you walk down it 30 meters and turn left, opens into an antechamber with a painted ceiling where gods recline on clouds, and beyond that the Galerie de Glace, the Hall of Mirrors, 73 meters of arched glass and gold where the light of a single candle multiplies into a constellation. You have stood in that gallery at night, alone, carrying a message, and you've seen your own reflection repeated 17 times into the dark, a small tired boy in blue livery holding a flame, and you have thought, no one at home would ever believe this. And then you have smelled the corner where the Comte de Sompting relieved himself behind the curtain, because the nearest privy was 400 steps away, and you have thought, no one at home would believe that either. Beauty on top, rot underneath, gold leaf over cold stone. That is Versailles, and by the end of tonight you will understand it in your bones, because your bones are where the palace keeps its truth. The door opens, Thévenot comes out sideways, the way fat men move through the narrow service doors of this palace, and he looks at you, and for one long second your whole future hangs on whether your eyes are open enough. They are, barely. He holds out a folded paper sealed with a blob of red wax gone hard as a scab. Apothecary's lodging, Grand Commun, 2nd floor. You know it? Yes, monsieur. Then why are you still standing here? You're already moving, and this is how you learn the first rule of Versailles. The palace does not care that you are tired. The palace has never once, in 50 years, cared that anyone was tired. Tiredness is what you're made of here. Tiredness is the fuel the whole machine burns. Your name is Nicolas Guérin. You need to know that, because for most of the next 24 hours nobody else will use it. You move fast down the corridor with the candle cupped behind your hand, because a candle that blows out in the north wing at 2 a.m. means walking in the dark, and walking in the dark at Versailles means stepping in things you will smell for the rest of the week. Let me tell you who you are, while your legs do the work they know by heart. You are Nicolas Guérin, 17 years old, third son of a harness maker from a village outside Chartres, and you've been at Versailles for 2 years, 7 months. You got here the way almost everyone gets here. Somebody knew somebody. Your mother's cousin's husband spent 30 years in the stables of the Grande Écurie. and when he retired with a crushed hip and a small pension, he spent the last favour of his career on you. A place. Not a good place. The lowest kind of place there is inside the actual palace. Garçon de service attached to the household of the king's first valet de chambre, which sounds magnificent and means you are the boy who carries things. Notes, candles, chamber pots, firewood, chocolate, wigs in their boxes, dead spaniels, once, wrapped in a tablecloth. But that's a story for another night. Back home, everyone said Versailles would make your fortune. They said a clever boy in the king's own house could rise, could catch an eye, could end up fat and pensioned like the cousin's husband. They weren't wrong exactly, but nobody told you the price, and the price is this. You have not slept more than 4 hours in a row since the spring of 1713. Because here is the secret of Versailles that the paintings never show you. This palace, 700 rooms, 2,000 windows, gardens that swallow the horizon, this monument that bankrupted a kingdom, has almost nowhere to sleep. Think about that. 10,000 people are attached to this place. Courtiers, officers, clergy, guards, clerks, cooks, musicians, doctors, gardeners, and an army of servants like you. The palace was built to display a king, not to house a population. The great apartments belong to the royal family and to ceremony. Everyone else fights, schemes, bribes, marries, and betrays for the rest. A duke and his duchess might be granted 2 small rooms in an attic under the roof. Rooms where the ceiling slopes so hard the duke cannot stand upright except in the middle. Rooms that bake in August and freeze in January, and that duke will weep with gratitude because those 2 miserable rooms mean he exists. To be lodged at Versailles, loger, is to be someone. Courtiers with vast chateaux of their own, warm, spacious, dry, abandon them to sleep in a converted closet here, because here is where the king is, and in this world, distance from the king is measured in units of your own worth as a human being. And below the dukes in their attics, the pyramid keeps going down. Secretaries sleep 2 to a bed in rooms partitioned out of larger rooms with wooden screens, so that one grand chamber from the old days now holds 6 households, each hearing everything the others do at night, every cough, every quarrel, every sin. Servants of courtiers sleep on straw mattresses that are rolled out at night across the floors of antechambers and rolled up again before dawn, so that the same marble where a marquise curtsies at noon is a dormitory of snoring valets at 3 in the morning. Kitchen boys sleep in the kitchens, on the tables, under the tables, in the warm ash-smelling corners near the banked ovens, and they are the lucky ones because the kitchens are warm. Guards doze standing up in niches, an art you've studied with real envy. And you, Nicholas Guérin, you sleep, when you sleep, on a folding cot in a windowless passage behind the apartment of your master's master, a passage exactly wide enough for the cot and nothing else, so that to turn over in the night you must first wake up and plan the manoeuvre. You don't have a room, you have a slot, like a knife in a drawer. That's what tonight's story's about, by the way. Not battles, not treaties. Sleep. Who gets it, who doesn't, what it costs, and what it looks like when the most powerful man in the world runs out of nights. Stay with me. It's darker than you think and stranger, and at the end of it, I promise, there is rest. But right now you're crossing the palace, and crossing the palace at night is its own education. You go down the small stone service stair, the one hidden inside the wall like a secret, its steps hollowed into shallow spoons by 80 years of feet. Your hand knows the iron rail, knows the place where it is rough with rust and will bite your palm if you slide too fast. At the bottom, you push through a leather-covered door, heavy, sighing on its hinges, into the long ground floor gallery, and the temperature drops again, because this gallery has windows on both sides, tall as trees, and every one of them leaks the October night through its seams. The moonlight comes through in pale slabs, laid out across the floor like paving stones made of milk, and you walk through light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. Your one small flame, the only warm colour in 100 metres of blue and silver and black. You pass a guard asleep on his feet, leaned into the angle of a doorway, halberd hooked in his crossed arms, chin down, and you make sure your shoes ring on the marble as you approach, so he half wakes and grunts and doesn't die of surprise. You pass 2 chamber pots set out like offerings. You pass a small dog, one of the hundreds that live loose in this palace, curled tight as a bread roll against a door where warmth leaks from under the crack, and it opens one eye at you, decides you are nothing, closes it. The dogs of Versailles sleep better than the people. Everyone says it. Everyone is right. And you pass a man in a nightgown and slippers, a gentleman hair loose, a candle of his own in one hand, walking somewhere quickly and quietly at 2 a.m, and you do what you've been trained to do, which is become furniture. Eyes down, body against the wall. You do not see him. Officially you are incapable of seeing him. A servant of your rank does not witness the nighttime traffic of the palace, the visits, the beds that receive guests who did not arrive by daylight, the whole silent second society that comes alive when the candles in the great rooms are snuffed. You have carried notes for that society. You have waited in freezing corridors while it conducted its business behind doors. You know things about 3 duchesses and a bishop that could get men exiled, and the reason you are still employed, still alive in the sense that matters here, is that everyone above you is perfectly confident you understand what your eyes are for. Your eyes are for the floor, your ears are for orders, your back is for carrying. The rest of you does not exist between sunset and dawn. Out through the north vestibule past the sleeping porter in his box, and the night air hits your face like a slap of cold water, almost welcome. And there across the paved street stands the Grand Commun, 4 stories of stone, black against the stars, home and workhouse to 1,000 servants, its 100 chimneys still breathing thin smoke because a palace kitchen never fully sleeps either. 50 windows dark, 3 windows lit. Behind one of those lit windows, an apothecary is awake, waiting for the sealed paper in your fist, and you would give a month of wages to know what is in it, because notes to apothecaries at 2 a.m. mean somebody important is sick. You cross the street at a half run, breath smoking, shoes slapping the cobbles, and you have no way of knowing it yet, but you are carrying the first small pebble of an avalanche. Because the year is 1715, the month will soon turn, and the man this palace was built around, the man whose body is the clock every one of these 10,000 lives is set by, has begun, very quietly, to die. The Grand Commun at night is a body breathing in its sleep. You come in through the service door on the north side, and the smell folds over you at once, thick and layered and almost warm. Old cooking fat, wood ash, wet stone, onions, tallow, the sweetish reek of the poultry room where tomorrow's birds hang plucked in rows, and human beings, hundreds of them, asleep in stacked rooms above your head, their collective breath and sweat and unwashed wool seeping down the stairwells like a fog. It is disgusting, and it is comforting, and you gave up trying to separate those 2 feelings a long time ago. This building feeds 5,000 meals a day. It never fully cools. In winter, servants invent errands here just to stand in it. The stairs are pitch dark, so you climb with your candle held high, and your free hand tracing the wall, plaster rough and cold under your fingertips, greasy at shoulder height where 10,000 other hands have traced the same line. On the second floor you count doors, 1, 2, 3, 4, and knock at the fifth, softly, twice, the way Thévenot taught you. Soft because the rooms on either side hold sleeping men who will curse you through the wall in language that would blister paint. The apothecary's assistant opens the door in his shirt, blinking, a smoking oil lamp behind him, and the room breathes out its own atmosphere. Dried herbs, vinegar, something bitter, something like burnt sugar. He takes the note, cracks the wax with his thumbnail, tilts it to the lamp. You watch his face, because watching faces is how a servant reads the news, and his face does something small and careful. A stillness, a closing. Wait, he says. He's gone into the back room a long time, long enough that you lean, just lean, one shoulder against the doorframe, and the doorframe is a mistake, because the moment your shoulder takes your weight, sleep rushes up at you from the floor like black water. Your knees soften, your candle dips, and you snatch yourself upright with your heart banging, hot wax splashed across your thumb. The pain is small and bright and useful. You press the burned spot with a fingertip to keep it awake. Keep yourself awake and you stand properly, feet apart the way guards stand, and you breathe the bitter herb smell and you count the floorboards. 11, 12, 13. Anything to stay above the water. He comes back with a small parcel wrapped in paper and string no bigger than a fist, surprisingly heavy, and a folded reply. Both to Monsieur Thévenot, into his hand, no one else's hand. You understand? Not a page, not another valet. His hand. Yes, monsieur. Go on then. And that is all. That is your entire share of whatever is happening. A weight in your palm, a seal you cannot break, a stillness in a tired man's face at 2 a.m. You will spend the walk back across the dark street doing what every servant at Versailles does with every scrap, turning it over, holding it to the light. Medicine, at this hour, carried by the private channel of the first valet's household, in secret into the king's own quarter of the palace. It could be anything, a courtier's fever, a lady's headache. And yet the assistant's face said otherwise, and the instruction said otherwise into his hand, no one else's, because at Versailles the health of one particular 76-year-old man is not medicine. It is politics. It is the price of bread in Paris. It is war and peace, and even a rumour of it must be carried in closed fists. You deliver it. Thévenot takes parcel and note without a word, without a glance, and shuts the door, and you stand in the corridor holding your candle, dismissed by silence, which is how you're usually dismissed. It is now nearly 3. You're permitted at last to go to your cot. Let me show you your bed, because your bed is the whole story of your life at Versailles, told in objects. The passage is behind the wardrobe room, a leftover space between 2 walls that were built in different decades and never quite agreed with each other. It is 1 metre wide. In it stands your cot, a wooden X frame with canvas stretched over it, and on the canvas a mattress, if we're being generous with the word, a canvas bag stuffed with straw that was fresh 2 years ago, and has since compressed into something with the texture and warmth of a ship's biscuit. 1 blanket, brown wool, thin in the middle where every blanket goes thin, smelling of you, because everything you own smells of you. There is no way to wash it and nowhere to dry it if you did. A wooden box under the cot holds everything else you possess on this earth. A spare shirt, a winter cap, a knife, a comb with 9 teeth, a small mirror with a chip in it, 41 livres in coins knotted into a stocking, and a letter from your mother that you cannot read fluently but have memorized, because the chaplain's clerk read it to you 4 times before he got bored. You take off your shoes. This is the best moment of your day, and I want you to feel it properly. The left shoe first, always, easing it over the heel, and the sole of your foot, released, throbs with its own pulse, a deep hot ache in the arch and a sharper one at the little toe where the leather has pressed a fold of your stocking into your flesh for 20 hours. Then the right. You peel the stockings down, and the cold air of the passage on your bare feet is so vivid it is almost a sound. You look at your feet by candlelight the way a workman inspects his tools, the callus along the ball, thick as a coin, the blister on the right heel, risen and gone soft, which you will need to needle in the morning, the toenail on the left big toe, bruised black since August, slowly growing out like a tide going out. Then you lie down in your clothes, because it is cold, and because you may be called, and you pull the blanket to your chin, and you blow out the candle, and the darkness of the passage closes over you, total, absolute, the kind of dark that has weight, and you cannot sleep. This is the joke your body plays on you, the cruelest joke at Versailles. All day sleep hunts you. It ambushes you in warm rooms, on stairs, in the middle of standing still, and then you lie down at last on your own cot, and your body, confused, mistrained, lies there humming like a struck bell. Your feet throb. Your burned thumb throbs. Through the wall to your right you can hear the wardrobe room's mice conducting their nightly inventory of the king's linen. Through the wall to your left, much fainter, filtered through 2 doors and an antechamber, you can hear the sounds of the night watch in the king's own apartment. A chair scraping once, a log settling in a grate, a man clearing his throat softly, with the practised softness of someone whose job is to make no sound in the room where France sleeps. Because that is the strangest thing of all, the thing you think about every night in your slot between the walls, 30 metres from your cot, through stone and gilt and silence. The King of France is lying in a bed the size of your entire sleeping passage, under a canopy worth more than your village, and he is guarded, even in sleep, especially in sleep, by a valet who lies on a folding bed at the foot of the royal mattress, and by guards beyond the door, and by ceremony wrapped around him so thick that even his dreams are in some sense state property. The king is never alone, not once, not for 1 hour of his whole long life. He wakes before witnesses and sleeps before witnesses, and it occurs to you, drifting at last, the bell of your body finally quieting, that in this entire palace of 10,000 exhausted people, there might not be a single soul, from the boy in the wall to the god in the bed, who ever gets to close a door and simply, privately, rest. Sleep takes you somewhere in the middle of that thought, the way it always does, mid-sentence like a candle pinched out. You get 2 hours and 40 minutes. A hand grips your shoulder in the dark and shakes it, and you are awake before you are alive, sitting up on the cot with your heart slamming and no idea what century it is. "Fires," says the voice. It belongs to Colin, the other garçon, 14 years old, from Picardy, a boy assembled entirely out of elbows and fear. It's gone 5:30. Perrault's already shouting. 5:30. Your body files a formal protest, a wave of nausea and cold and grief that rolls from your stomach to your scalp, and then your body is overruled, because your body is always overruled, and you are pulling on stockings stiff with yesterday, forcing swollen feet into cold shoes, a small violence you perform on yourself every single morning, and you are moving. Understand the machine you are part of. Before the King of France opens his eyes at 8 o'clock, the palace around him must be converted from a cold, dark, reeking ruin back into Versailles. This happens every morning, in the dark, and it is done by people like you, and it must be invisible. That is the actual job, the deep job under all the small jobs. The labour must never be seen. The great ones must walk at 8 into warm-lit, gleaming rooms and experience them as facts of nature, like sunrise. If a duchess sees the boy who lays her fire, something has gone wrong. You're not staff exactly, you are stagehands, and the play never, ever closes. So, fires. You and Colin go down to the wood court in the blue-black cold, breath steaming, and you load the carrier, a wooden frame with a strap that goes across your chest, with split logs. And I want you to feel this weight honestly, because you will carry it up 3 floors, 11 times. Loaded, the carrier weighs perhaps 30 kilos. The strap finds the same groove across your collarbone it found yesterday, a band of dull, specific pain, and the logs shift and knock as you climb, bark biting your forearms where you steady the load, splinters finding the cracked skin at the base of your fingers, and by the second flight your thighs are burning and your breath is loud in the stairwell, and by the third trip you have stopped noticing any of it, because noticing is a luxury, and you have rent to pay in effort. In each room, this same sequence, so drilled into your hands they could do it without you. Kneel at the hearth, and the marble bites your knees through your breeches. Rake yesterday's ash, and the fine grey dust rises and coats your throat. You can taste it, mineral and dead, and it settles into the creases of your knuckles where it will live all day. Lay the kindling in its little tent. Strike the fire steel against the flint, and this is a skill, a real one. The spark must jump to the charred cloth in the tinderbox, and your hands are so cold this morning that it takes 4 strikes, 5, the steel skidding, a bright line of pain where it clips your knuckle and then the spark catches, a red star in the black cloth, and you bend and blow gently, gently, cheeks close to the cold ash smell, until a flame the size of a fingernail stands up and you feed it, twig by twig, like coaxing a soul back into a body. Then up, knees cracking, onto the next room. 22 fireplaces before 7 o'clock. Your share of the morning's resurrection. Water next. There is no water in the palace, none you can drink. Nothing behind the walls but those groaning fountain pipes, so drinking and washing water comes up in copper cans from the cisterns, and a full copper can weighs 15 kilos and wants to swing against your shin at every step, and the handle is a thin bar that loads all 15 kilos across the 4 fingers of your right hand until they go white, then numb, then, hours later, ache in a way that feels permanent. You are 17 and your right hand already aches in cold weather like an old man's. It will do so for the rest of your life. Versailles is writing itself into your skeleton one morning at a time, and while you climb and kneel and carry, the rest of the machine wakes around you and you move through it like a fish through a reef. The corridor traffic thickens. Chambermaids with armfuls of linen, their eyes as raw as yours. The men of the wardrobe carrying the day's coats at arm's length like holy objects. A hairdresser's boy running with a wig box. 2 Swiss guards changing post with a stamp and a clash. The latrine men, lowest of the low, God's most invisible children, going door to door collecting the night's chamber pots onto a covered cart, whose smell arrives before it and lingers after, and even you, a boy who sleeps in a wall, step aside from them and breathe through your mouth, and they see you do it, and their faces do not change, because at Versailles even the bottom of the ladder has a bottom. Stop and look at this, 1 second, before the day sweeps us on. The most sophisticated court in Europe. Etiquette so refined that the width of an armchair, the right to sit on a stool, the right to hand the king his shirt, are matters men would ruin themselves over. And the whole perfumed structure floats on a black river of pots and ash, and freezing water carried in the dark by children. The courtiers upstairs are fighting over stools. You are fighting a copper can. Everyone at Versailles is fighting over something. And here's the truth you have worked out at 17 that some dukes never work out at all. The fights are the same fight. Closeness, standing, the terror of being nothing. The Duke fears exile from the king's gaze the exact way you fear the road back to Chartres. This palace has 10,000 inhabitants and exactly one disease, and everybody has it. At 7, you get bread. You eat it standing in the wood court because sitting is not for you, not here, not in daylight. The loaf end is yesterday's dense as clay, and you tear it with your teeth and it scours the raw spot inside your cheek. And it is, and I mean this, delicious, because you are 17 and you've been hauling weight since 5:30, and your body would thank you for boiled rope. A cup of thin wine cut with water, 3 minutes standing shoulder against cold stone, watching the sky over the Grand Commun turn from slate to pearl. That is breakfast. That is also, though you don't know the word for it, the only moment of privacy you will get today, and some animal part of you knows it, because you always eat facing the wall. Then Perrault finds you. Perrault always finds you. Perrault is the sewer fisher who governs the garçons, a dry grey man of 50 with a voice like a door hinge, and he has never in 2 years said your name without a complaint attached, and this morning is no different. You are slow, you are dirty, look at your hands, wipe your hands, and then he says the thing that changes the shape of your entire day. You're wanted for the chamber this evening, torch duty at the coucher, Garnier's ill. A pause, while your heart does something complicated. Try not to disgrace the household in front of the King of France, the coucher, the king's public going to bed. Tonight, for the first time in your life, you will stand inside the room. You, Nicolas Guérin, who sleeps in a wall. You spend 1 whole second being proud. Then you remember what everyone in the household has been whispering for a week. The thing the sealed note and the heavy little parcel confirmed at 2 o'clock this morning, and the pride goes cold in your chest. The king is not well, and tonight you're going to see it with your own eyes, from 6 feet away, by torchlight. But the coucher is 15 hours away, and 15 hours at Versailles is a lifetime. So let the day take you, and let me show you what this place becomes when the sun is up. Because the palace by day and the palace by night are 2 different animals wearing the same golden skin. By 9, the chateau is full. And when I say full, I need you to understand what that means at Versailles in 1715. This is not a private residence. This is a public building. Anyone can walk into the palace of the King of France, provided they are decently dressed, and if they are a man wearing a sword, and if a man arrives without a sword, no matter, there is a fellow at the gate who rents them. Think about that. The most powerful monarch on earth lives in a house you can enter off the road, with a rented sword. So the galleries fill like a market. Provincial gentry come to gawk, lawyers with petitions, wives of Paris merchants in their best silk, pickpockets, priests, prostitutes working the crowd with perfect decorum, sightseers who have walked from Paris, all of them mixing with the actual court, the dukes and marshals and mistresses, in one vast, slow river of humanity that flows through the state apartments all day, staring, sweating, gossiping, stealing anything not nailed down. The gold fringe disappears off curtains, tassels vanish. Once, famously, someone stole lace off a bed while the room was full of people. The palace eats candles and bleeds trimmings, and the noise, heels on parquet, hundreds of pairs, a sound like endless applause. The hiss and rustle of silk, doors, little dogs, a man laughing too loudly at something a duke said, the laugh pitched carefully so the duke can hear how much he is enjoyed. Under it all, the permanent murmur, 10,000 words a minute about the only 3 subjects this palace has ever discussed. Who is rising, who is falling, and how is the king? How is the king? This morning that question has a new weight, and you can feel it in the air of the galleries the way you can feel weather coming. Nothing has been announced. Nothing needs announcing. Versailles is an instrument for detecting the moods of one man, 10,000 needles all quivering toward the same magnet, and the needles have moved. The king rode out to hunt at Marley last month and came back tired. The king has been complaining, this from a friend of a man in the kitchens, of a pain in his left leg. The king ate almost nothing at his supper Tuesday, and the king's appetite has been a public spectacle for 50 years. The man eats like a siege army, 4 plates of soup, a whole pheasant, ham, mutton, pastry, fruit, all before witnesses, and when a king who eats like that pushes his plate away, the fact runs through the palace faster than fire. You collect these scraps all morning without trying, the way your coat collects ash. A page says the doctors were sent for early. A woman of the wardrobe says the leg is swollen. Thévenot says nothing at all, and Thévenot saying nothing is the loudest thing anyone says all day. Meanwhile you work. There is always work, and late in the morning work hands you a gift. Perrault sends you out to the gardens to carry a message to the fountain crews on the far side of the Grand Canal, and this errand, which will take you 2 hours of walking, is the finest thing that can happen to a palace servant on a clear October day. You come out of the shadow of the chateau onto the top of the great terrace, and the gardens open below you, and it does not matter that you have seen this view 500 times. It reaches into your chest and lifts something every single time. The world falls away from the palace in a geometry so vast and so calm it makes your eyes ache. The parterres laid out like embroidery in coloured gravel and clipped box. The twin staircases descending. The fountain of Latona rising in tiers of gilded lead. And beyond it the long green carpet of the tapis vert running down between walls of trees to where Apollo's chariot bursts out of its pool, horses and God frozen in black and gold mid-leap, and beyond that the Grand Canal, a cross of silver water so long that on misty mornings you cannot see the end of it, aimed like an arrow at the setting sun. Because everything here is aimed at the sun, the whole landscape is a sentence with one subject. 200,000 trees, dozens of fountains, statues by the hundred, emperors and gods and nymphs staring down avenues cut through forests with the ruler. 50 years ago this was a swamp and a sandhill, the worst land anyone could have chosen. No water, no view, no soil, and the king chose it precisely because it was impossible. and then spent 30 years and rivers of money, and, though no one says this above a whisper, the lives of thousands of soldiers and labourers, dead of marsh fever, digging his waterworks to force the impossible into bloom. You walk down the steps into a garden that is also a graveyard and also a miracle, and both things are true at once, and that, again, always, everywhere, is Versailles. The air down among the hedges smells of wet box leaves, bitter and green and cat-like, and of raked earth, and of the canal's flat pond water breath. Gardeners are everywhere, an army in brown, sweeping leaves off gravel that must never show a leaf, clipping walls of hornbeam with shears taller than you are, and the sound of those shears, a great slow metallic breathing, shh, shh, follows you down the avenues. You deliver your message at the pump house, where men black to the elbow wrestle with a valve the size of a cartwheel, and the master fountaineer reads the note and spits and says words about the state of the pipes that you pretend not to hear. Because here is a secret the tourists never learn. The fountains of Versailles, the most famous waterworks on earth, do not work. Not all at once. There has never been enough water. Not once. Not in 50 years. The ponds and reservoirs and the monstrous machine at Marley that heaves the river uphill, all of it together can feed only a fraction of the jets at a time, so the fountains of Versailles are a performance in the most literal sense. Boys with whistles run ahead of the king on his garden walks, signalling the crews who spin the valves so that each fountain leaps into life just before His Majesty rounds the hedge and dies quietly the moment he's passed. The king has walked these gardens 10,000 times, always through a world of dancing water, and the water has always been an actor, hitting its mark, waiting in the wings. Whether the old man knows, whether he has always known and finds it fitting, is one of those questions you would like to ask someone someday, when you're old and far from here and it can't cost you anything. You take the long way back on purpose, along the canal, and you allow yourself, because no one is watching, 4 minutes of standing completely still. The water is pewter-coloured and perfectly calm. A heron stands in the shallows by the reeds, motionless, a grey hieroglyph. Far off, on the cross-arm of the canal, the gondolas the Republic of Venice sent the king are moored in a row. Gilded and absurd and beautiful, their little flotilla of Venetian boatmen housed in buildings by the water that everyone calls Little Venice. Behind you, the palace lies along its terrace in the long light, honey-coloured, immense, its 2,000 windows catching the sun in sheets of flame, and from here, from this distance, with the smell of water and cut grass, and a bird crying somewhere in the trees of the bosques, it is simply, unarguably, the most beautiful thing human beings have ever made, and you are inside it, part of it, a mote in its eye. 4 minutes. Then you run, because you have been gone too long, because your feet hurt, because the light is already tilting toward afternoon, and tonight you carry a torch in the bedchamber of the man who dreamed all this out of a swamp, and who is now, if the palace's 10,000 needles are right, beginning to leave it. In the middle of the afternoon, an old man teaches you how to hold fire. His name is Bontemps. No relation to the great Bontemps who was first valet before your time, though he has dined out on the near miss of that name for 40 years. He is 68 years old, a valet of the chamber since before the court even moved to Versailles, and he is the one Thévenot sends to make sure the substitute torch-boy does not, in his words, set fire to the kingdom of France. He finds you in the wardrobe passage, looks you over the way a farmer looks over a horse he did not choose, and sighs from somewhere very deep. Stand straight, straighter, mother of God. All right, listen to me, boy, because I am going to say everything once. You listen, and because you listen with your whole body, the way you've learned to listen here, he softens by perhaps 1 degree, and what he gives you over the next hour is not just instruction, it is the closest thing to an inheritance anyone has ever offered you. The flambeau weighs more than you think, and your arm will die long before the ceremony ends. So you do not hold it out like a young idiot showing his strength. You bring the elbow in against the hip bone here so the bone carries the weight, not the muscle. You pick a spot on the wall, and you become part of the wall. If the wax runs, it runs on your hand. You will want to flinch. You will not flinch. Men have held that torch with wax cooling on their knuckles like candle ends, and made no more sound than the andirons. That is the whole art of this house, boy, and you may as well learn it at your age. At Versailles the body's not yours. You lend it to the king for the length of your service, and if it hurts, that is a private matter between you and God, to be discussed later, elsewhere, quietly. He walks you, empty-handed, through the geography of the ceremony, where you will stand 1 pace out from the balustrade to the left, where you must never let your shadow fall on the king, where your eyes go, nowhere, at nothing, a soft focus on the middle distance that sees everything and looks at nothing, and he checks your eyes, actually takes your chin in his dry old fingers and turns your face to the light and studies your gaze like a jeweller and says, "Good, you've got dead eyes already. 2 years in the corridors, is it? It shows. That's a compliment, boy. Close your mouth." And then, because you are brave or stupid or 17, which is all 3, you ask him, "Monsieur, is it true the king is ill?" The room goes very still. Bontemps looks at you for a long moment, and you watch 40 years of court survival move behind his eyes, weighing you, weighing the walls, weighing the odds that this question is a trap, and concluding visibly that you are exactly what you appear to be. A boy from Chartres with ash in his knuckles who will be holding a torch 6 feet from the truth in 5 hours anyway. "What you will see tonight," he says at last quietly, "you will see, and you will put it in the same place you put everything else you've seen in this house. You know the place, I mean." "Yes, monsieur. I know you do. You sleep in a wall. Boys who sleep in walls learn the place early." He straightens the shoulder of your livery with 2 precise tugs, an oddly gentle gesture, like a man adjusting a picture frame. "I will tell you one thing, because you carry torches, and torches stand close, and you had better not gasp like a schoolgirl when you see his face. The king is 76 years old. He has reigned for 72 of those years. 72, boy. There is no man alive in France, hardly a man alive in Europe who can remember another king. He was crowned before your grandfather was born. Every soul in this palace, every duke, every scullion, has lived their entire life inside his life, the way a fish lives in a lake." He stops. His jaw works. "And lakes feel very permanent, boy, until the summer they go dry." He turns to leave, and then he stops in the doorway and delivers, without turning around, the sentence you will still be able to recite when you are his age. "Tonight, hold the light steady. Whatever you see, the light at least should be steady." The hours before the coucher pass the way hours pass before anything enormous, too slowly, and then all at once. You eat your evening bread and cannot taste it. You clean yourself at the yard pump, ice water on your neck, scrubbing the ash out of your knuckle creases with sand until the skin is raw and pink, and you comb your hair with the 9-toothed comb by candlelight in the chipped mirror, and the boy who looks back at you is white-faced and hollow-eyed, and, you notice with an odd jolt, no longer looks like anyone from your village. He looks like a Versailles face, lean, closed, watchful. The palace has been carving you, and you never felt the knife. Evening comes down over the chateau. The daytime crowd drains away down the avenue toward Paris and the town, and the palace changes animals again. The candles begin, thousands of them, rooms blooming into gold one after another, and the state apartments fill with the evening court, the apartment, music and card tables and fortunes changing hands over lansquenet while the October dark presses against 2,000 windows. You move through the edges of it on your last errands, and everywhere, under the music, the same murmur, the needles quivering. He supped in his chamber again. They say the leg is worse. They say Fagin says it is sciatica. They say. At 9:15, Thévenot puts the flambeau in your hands. It is heavier than you thought. Bontemps, of course, was right. A gilt bronze shaft as long as your arm, crowned with thick white wax candles already lit, and the flame heat washes down over your fist and forearm dry and steady, and the light it throws is astonishing. A warm sphere 3 meters wide with you at its centre, and you think, absurdly, standing in the service passage waiting for the signal. This is the most valuable thing I've ever held. I'm holding a piece of the ceremony of France. And then the door opens, and the sound comes out at you. The low surf sound of 100 courtiers gathered in one room, and Thévenot says, "Now," slowly. Left of the balustrade, go, and you walk out of the wall, out of your whole invisible life into the bedchamber of the king. The king's bedchamber sits at the exact centre of Versailles. Not roughly the centre, the exact centre, on the axis, so that the whole palace, the whole garden, the avenues of the town, the very roads of France converging on this hill, all of it lines up on the bed. The king sleeps at the crossing point of his kingdom the way a heart sits at the crossing point of a body. When they rebuilt this room a few years ago, they aimed the bed east behind the balustrade, facing the windows over the marble court, so that the sun rising comes straight up the avenue from Paris and in through those windows and falls on the bed of the man they named after it. Nothing at Versailles is an accident. Everything is a sentence, and every sentence says the same thing. You take your place 1 pace left of the gilded balustrade, elbow against your hip bone the way the old man taught you, and you become part of the wall, and from inside your sphere of torchlight, with your dead eyes seeing everything and looking at nothing, you watch the most famous bedtime in the world. The room is full, 100 men, maybe more, the highest blood of France packed shoulder to shoulder on the public side of the balustrade, princes, dukes, marshals, the red of a cardinal, all of them in silk that drinks your torchlight and gives it back in soft explosions of colour, and all of them, everyone, watching a single old man in the way that hungry men watch food. The heat of the room is enormous, candles and bodies together. After your corridors it is like standing inside a loaf of bread, and the smell is powder and pomade and hot wax and silk, and underneath it, faint, something medicinal, something herbal and dark, and underneath that, fainter still, and you wish you could stop smelling it, but you cannot, something sweetish and wrong. And then the crowd shifts, and you see him. The King of France is sitting in his chair by the fire, being undressed by dukes. I want to slow down here, because this is the thing itself, the beating heart of everything strange about this place. And you will never see it again, not like this. The coucher is not a man going to bed. It is a liturgy. Every gesture is assigned, and the assignments are honours, and the honours are ranked, and men have schemed for decades to move one rank closer to the royal shirt. The first gentleman of the chamber, the grand master of the wardrobe, the princes of the blood. One removes the coat, another the waistcoat. The shirt comes off the royal body and travels hand to hand by protocol like a relic, and the candlestick, the famous candlestick. Each night at this moment the king glances around the room and names one nobleman, just one, who is granted the honour of holding the candlestick during the remainder of the ceremony, and grown men, dukes with armies of ancestors, wait for that glance the way farmers wait for rain, and the man he names tonight flushes with pleasure, actually flushes, a duke, coloured like a boy, over a candlestick. You hold fire for a living. Nobody has ever flushed. You file this away in the place where you keep things, and the place, you notice, has started to feel crowded. But the king, look at the king, because you cannot help it, because 6 feet away and lit by your own torch is the face from the coins. He was the handsomest man of his age. Everyone says it. The paintings insist on it. The mask of him is stamped on medals, gates, ceilings, the sun itself. And the architecture of it is still there. The great curved nose, the heavy-lidded eyes, the upright carriage that 70 years of dancing masters built into his spine. He sits like a king. He will sit like a king in his coffin. But your torch is honest, and by its light you can see what the palace has been whispering. The flesh has fallen in around the architecture. The face is yellowish under the powder. The cheeks collapsed over the toothless jaw. They pulled his teeth years ago, all of them, and botched it. Took part of the jawbone too, so that the famous face has been slowly folding in on itself for decades. The hands on the chair arms are dark-spotted, the knuckles huge, the fingers curling with gout, and the left leg propped before him on a cushion while the dukes work around it. Careful, so careful, nobody touches the leg. The left leg even through the stocking looks wrong, swollen, and when a valet kneels to ease the shoe from the right foot, the king's whole body tightens. One small hiss of breath through the nose, instantly mastered, and 100 silk courtiers pretend with all their might that they did not hear it. And the pretending is so loud it rings. That is when you understand what this room actually is tonight. It is not a bedtime. It is 100 of the most powerful people in France gathered to inspect, under cover of ceremony, the machinery their entire world runs on, listening to it knock and rattle and calculating every single one of them, behind their reverent faces. How long? Who rises when it stops? Where do I stand on the morning after? The old man in the chair built this palace precisely so he could keep his nobility here, under his eye, dependent, domesticated, fighting over candlesticks instead of raising provinces against him, and it worked. It worked for 50 years, and now the same golden trap holds him at its centre while his captives watch him die by inches, nightly, with the best seats in Europe. He caged them with etiquette. Now the etiquette cages him. He is not allowed weakness or privacy or pain. He will perform this ceremony every night that he can stand, and when he cannot stand he will perform it lying down, because the performance is the kingdom, and he has known that longer than anyone alive. Your arm, by the way, is dying. Bontemps was right about that too. The flambeau's weight has burrowed from your fist up through your wrist into your shoulder, a spreading grey ache, and a rope of melted wax has crept over the back of your hand, scalding, then merely hot, then cool and tight like a second skin, and you have not flinched. You have made no more sound than the andirons, and some part of you, some new hard part, is proud of that in a way you will think about later. The prayers are said. The chamber empties by ranks, the great tide of silk withdrawing backward, bowing through the doors, the honours of the candlestick and the shirt all spent, and the crowd thins to the few dozen with the rite of the petit coucher. And then those two are gone, and the room, this enormous golden heart chamber, is suddenly almost quiet. The king, a handful of valets, a doctor in black standing back in the shadows like a raven on a fence, and you and your torch. They help him to the bed. It takes 3 of them, and it takes long, and this close. In the quiet you can hear his breathing, the careful, managed breathing of a man budgeting each movement against a ledger of pain, and as they ease the ruined leg up onto the mattress, the breath catches once, and the old king says, very low, to no one, to the canopy above him, 4 words you are not supposed to hear, and will never repeat, and will never forget. Ah, it grows tedious. Then the curtains of the bed are drawn halfway. The night valet lays out his folding bed at the royal feet like a dog lying down at the foot of God. Thévenot catches your eye and cuts it toward the door, and you back out of the chamber of the sun the way you were taught. Smoothly, invisibly, carrying your light with you, and the last thing you see through the closing door is the fire's glow on the balustrades gilt, and the dark canopy of the bed at the centre of France, holding its old man, and the last thing you think is the old valet's sentence, which you now understand was never about torches. Whatever you see, the light at least should be steady. In the service passage, Thévenot takes the flambeau from your locked fingers, peels it from them almost, and looks at the cooled wax sheeted across the back of your hand and at your face, and says the only kind thing he has ever said to you, which is, "Go to bed, Guérin." He used your name. You lie on your cot in your slot in the wall 30 metres from the most famous bed on earth, and the palace rustles and drips and scurries around you both, and you think, he is lying there right now, on the other side of that dark in his cage at the centre of the cage, and he cannot sleep either. I would bet my 41 leaves on it. And tonight, for the first time in your 2 years and 7 months, you fall asleep feeling something for the King of France that no ceremony has a name for, and it is pity, and it frightens you, because pity flows downhill, and if it can reach him from you, then the world is upside down, and the summer is coming when the lake goes dry. You get 4 hours. It feels like a feast. 3 days after the coucher, something unheard of happens. You are given half a day, not as kindness. Nothing here happens as kindness. The household schedule has been shuffled around the king's doctors, whole blocks of ceremony quietly cancelled, and in the reshuffling a crack opens, 4 hours wide on a Sunday afternoon, and Perrault looks at you and Colin standing in the wood court like 2 candle stubs and says, "Out, both of you, be back by the flambeau," and turns away before anyone can discover he has done a human thing. So let me show you the other Versailles, the one the paintings ignore even harder than they ignore you. The town. Because there is a town. People forget that. The palace did not land on an empty hill. It dragged a whole city into being around itself, the way a whale drags gulls. Down the slope from the gates, fanned out along the 3 great avenues, lives everyone the palace needs and will not house. The merchants, the laundresses, the wig-makers, the wine-sellers, The horse dealers, the carpenters, the surgeons of the second rank, the lodging-house keepers who rent beds to courtiers' servants at prices that would make a Paris landlord blush, and the thousands upon thousands of workers who keep the machine fed. 30, 40,000 souls. Nobody has counted honestly. All of them living off the golden mountain the way a village lives off a glacier, drinking its meltwater, cursing its cold. You and Colin go down through the gates with your passes, past the Swiss guards, out of the smell of the palace and into the smell of the town, and the change hits your nose like a chord changing. Wood smoke, horse dung, tanneries somewhere east, hot bread, mud, and under it all the particular sourness of streets where too many people live over too few drains, which is to say, the ordinary smell of everywhere in France, the smell you grew up inside and stopped noticing, until 2 years of marble corridors taught your nose new prejudices. Colin actually stops on the pavement and breathes it, eyes shut, like a man at the seaside. Smells like home, he says. He's right. And you both stand there for a second, two boys in the king's blue, homesick for dung. The streets are Sunday loud, church bells, hawkers, a fiddle going somewhere, cartwheels, and everywhere, the talk. And the talk is all one subject, and the subject is the leg. The town knows. Of course the town knows. The town does the palace's laundry. A laundress with forearms like a blacksmith is holding court outside a wine shop, telling 6 neighbours what the state of certain linens has been these 3 weeks, and you should hear the authority in her voice. Doctors of the Sorbonne never spoke with such authority, and the terrible thing is she has better sources than the official bulletins, and everyone knows it. In Versailles, the town, the health of the king is not loyalty or theatre. It is economics, naked and shivering. If the king dies, does the court stay? If the court goes, who buys the wigs, who rents the beds, who eats the bread of 400 bakers? Every conversation on the avenue is a man calculating whether his whole world is about to pack its wagons, and doing the calculation out loud, over wine, at volumes that would be treason 60 metres up the hill. You have 4 hours and a little silver, so you and Colin do what boys with 4 hours and a little silver have done since the beginning of the world. You eat. There's a cook shop off the market square that every servant of the household knows, a low brown room with benches worn smooth as riverbed stones, and for 3 sous you get a bowl of Sunday stew, mutton and beans and marrow, ladled from a pot the size of a church font that has, you suspect, never in its history been fully emptied, only endlessly renewed. A stew with ancestors, a stew with a lineage longer than some barons. And I want you to have this meal properly, because it is the best meal of your year. The bowl is hot enough that you have to hold it by the rim, fingertips shifting. The steam carries thyme and fat straight up into your face. The first spoonful scalds the raw spot inside your cheek, and you do not care. You physically cannot make yourself care. And the marrow slides from the split bone dark and silky and tasting of iron and comfort. And the bread is fresh, actually fresh, tearing in soft white sheets. And around you 40 other people's spoons knock against 40 other bowls in a warm clattering fog of talk. And nobody at all needs you to stand against a wall. You sit on a bench like a person for an hour. Your feet under the table throb their gratitude in slow waves. Colin talks the whole time because Colin is 14, and talking is his way of pinching himself awake in the world, and somewhere in the middle of it he says the thing that you will carry back up the hill like a stone in your shoe. My uncle says, he says around bread, that when the old king goes, the court goes to Paris, and they'll shut the palace like a trunk, My uncle says in 10 years there'll be sheep in the marble court and we'll all be back in Picardy. He chews. I told him, good, sheep are honest work. And then his face does something younger. But it isn't true, is it? It can't just stop, can it? A thing that size? And every adult within earshot has gone slightly quiet, not looking at you, and you realise the whole bench is waiting on your answer. You, 17, an authority now. A man who has stood inside the room, and you understand for the first time how rumour actually works, that it is not lying. It is thousands of frightened people passing a candle from hand to hand in the dark, and you say the only true thing you have. The king is old. The palace is stone. Stone lasts. And the bench nods and goes back to its bowls, comforted by nothing, the way people are. Afterward you walk the market with your last sou burning, and you buy, after long negotiation with yourself, 2 things. A pair of knitted wool stockings, thick, grey, undyed, honest. Because winter is coming to your corridor and the corridor always wins. And from a stall of second-hand oddments for 1 sou, a thing you absolutely do not need. A little brass pocket compass, cracked across the glass, needle still swinging true, and you cannot explain the purchase even to yourself, except that you stood there with it in your palm, feeling the needle tremble and settle, always finding its one direction no matter how you turn the case. And something in your chest said mine, and for 1 sou, on your one Sunday in the 18th year of your life, you let your chest win an argument. It will sit in the wooden box under your cot for years. You will carry it in your pocket the day you finally walk down the avenue for the last time. But that is later. Coming back up the hill at dusk is like walking into weather. The palace fills the sky at the top of the avenue, black against the burnt orange west. Its 1,000 western windows all catching the same dying light, so that the whole immense facade seems, for about 4 minutes, to be quietly on fire, and you and Colin walk up toward it in silence, full of stew, warm in the legs, and the closer you get, the quieter you both become, not from awe, you're past awe, but the way workmen go quiet approaching the machine, listening for its mood. At the gates, the Swiss check your passes. In the courtyards, the lamps are being lit. Somewhere above, behind one particular row of windows, the doctors are changing the dressings on the leg of France. Back into the trunk, Colin says softly, and you both go in, and the palace closes over you like water. And this is the last easy day. I want you to know that now, so you can hold on to the taste of the marrow, and the weight of the compass, and the sound of the fiddle in the street. The last easy day. From here, the story goes up the dark stair, and it does not come back down until everything is changed. Now the days begin to move strangely, and I want to be honest with you about time, the way the palace itself was never honest about anything. Because what you lived that autumn, what everyone at Versailles lived, didn't feel like a sequence of dates. It felt like standing on ice and hearing, somewhere below your feet, the first long crack. So let the weeks slide together the way they slid together then, and follow the crack. It begins officially with a walk. On the 9th of August, the king goes out to Marly, his other palace, his escape palace, the one he built because even the man who built Versailles needed somewhere to hide from it, and he is driven through the gardens in a wheeled chair because the leg will no longer carry him distances, and the court notes it. 10,000 needles swinging. The king is wheeled now, and the next day he complains of the pain going down the thigh, and Fagon, his first physician, a brilliant, terrifying, half-crippled old man who has physicked the king for decades and killed. The kitchen whispers, half the royal family with his purges and his bleedings, Fagin examines the leg and pronounces with all the majesty of his office, sciatica. It is not sciatica. You learn what it is the way you learn everything, from below, through the service stairs, where truth travels faster than in the galleries, because servants, unlike courtiers, are not paid to lie to each other. Colin hears it from a boy who serves the surgeons. You hear it from Colin at the wood court, at dawn, both of you steaming in the cold, and Colin says the word wrong. He says it in his Picard way, but there is no way to say it that isn't cold water down the spine. Gangrene. The leg is dying before the man. That is what the word means. The blood no longer reaches the foot. The flesh below the knee is darkening like a fruit going bad. First the toes, then the foot, then the shin. Black patches spreading under the skin while the doctors bathe the leg in burgundy wine and aromatic herbs. Actual wine. They are marinating the King of France, and every servant who carries those basins away knows more than the official bulletins, because the servants have smelled it, and the smell does not lie. You smelled it yourself, that first night at the Coucher, the sweetish wrongness under the medicine, and you did not have the word yet, and now you have the word, and you will spend the rest of your life wishing certain words came without smells attached. And here is where you see something that you'll try to describe for the rest of your life and never quite manage, because it is too large and too strange. You see a whole world realize it is ending, and keep dancing, because the machine does not stop. That is the thing. The machine cannot stop. Stopping is the one move it does not have. The fires are still laid, 22 of them. Your knees still crack on the marble every morning. The wood still comes up the stairs on your collarbone, 30 kilos, 11 trips. The dinners are still cooked for a man who cannot eat them. Whole services of dishes marched from the Grand Commun across the street in procession, guarded, covered, cooling. The meat of the king, la viande du roi. They announce it as it passes, and men remove their hats to a tureen, and it goes up, and it comes back down barely touched. And a dozen officers of the mouth eat like princes off the returns, while their master lives on broth and a little jelly. The apartment evenings continue, the card tables, the music, because the king commands that they continue. He orders his court to be amused while he rots at the centre of it, partly out of iron, partly, you think, holding your torch at the edge of one of those unbearable evenings, watching duchesses laugh with their eyes pinned to the door of the sick room, because he knows exactly what his palace is. He built it. It is a theatre, and a theatre must never learn what an empty stage sounds like, because it never forgets. He works too. That is the part that hushes even the kitchen. Propped in his chair, the leg like a log of black marble in front of him, the smell in the room now so thick that courtiers admitted to the bedside come out grey. The old man holds councils, signs papers, dictates to secretaries, reviews troop dispositions with his ministers, hour after hour, day after day, running the largest kingdom in Christendom off a body that is leaving him province by province, toe by toe. 72 years of reigning, and the habit is stronger than the gangrene. You carry candles into the anterooms of those councils, and you see the ministers waiting, men who rule millions, standing in clusters, silent, and their faces all wear the same expression, and it takes you days to place it, and then you place it. It is the expression of sons outside a father's sick room. All of France is standing in that corridor. Nobody in the kingdom, nobody remembers how to be France without him. Meanwhile, underneath the hush, the other thing begins, the thing that makes you sick in a way the smell never did, the repositioning. You feel it first as traffic, New patterns in who visits whom, new corridors busy at new hours. The king's death will remake every fortune in this building, and every soul in it knows the map of what comes next. The heir is a 5-year-old child, the king's great-grandson, a grave little boy you've seen carried through the galleries, everyone between him and the throne having died in one terrible span a few years back. Sons and grandsons falling to smallpox and measles, within months of each other until the palace ran out of black cloth, and a 5-year-old king means a regency, and a regency means the Duc d'Orléans, the king's nephew, clever, scandalous, mistrusted. And so, while the old man dictates his last instructions upstairs, downstairs the court is quietly, delicately, hideously, turning itself toward the rising sun. Men who have not visited Orléans' apartments in 10 years discover pressing reasons to pass his door. Women recalculate friendships. And the old king knows, of course he knows. He has watched this court for half a century the way you watch a fire, and one evening, the story runs down the service stairs in a single night. He says to his valets, quite calmly, that he has seen from his window more people walking toward his nephew's wing than toward his own chapel, and that this is natural, and that courts are courts. And the valet who repeated it swore the king almost smiled. That is when you stop pitying him from below and begin, and you cannot help it and would never confess it, to admire him, the way you would admire any creature that dies without once breaking character. And through all of it, the palace does not sleep, and neither do you. The nights fracture entirely now, messengers at all hours, doctors' consultations at midnight, priests coming and going through their private ways, and you and Colin and every garson in the household are burned down to wicks, carrying, waiting, standing in cold corridors holding lights while history is decided behind doors, and one night in the last week of August you fall asleep standing up, truly asleep, for perhaps 4 seconds, against the wall outside the council anteroom, torch in hand, and you dream, in 4 seconds, of your mother's kitchen, of the specific sound her wooden spoon made against the pot, and you wake with the torch tilting and catch it, heart exploding, wax splashed, nobody has seen, and you stand there in the enormous candlelit silence of the Palace of France, with tears suddenly and stupidly running down your face, not from fear, from the spoon, from the sound of the spoon, and you press your burned thumb, and you put the spoon in the place where you keep things, and you hold the light steady. On the 25th of August, the feast of St. Louis, his name day, the drums and oboes play under his window one last time because he commands it, and that evening he is worse, and the rumour goes through the palace in an hour. The viaticum has been carried up, the last rites, and from that night on the crowd in the staterooms never really goes home. The court simply installs itself, sleeping in chairs, on floors, on window-sills, 10,000 people holding their breath in shifts, and Versailles becomes what it will remain for the next several nights. And there has never been anything like it before or since. The most beautiful waiting room on earth. Let me show you the palace during the death watch, because you saw it as almost no one else saw it. From inside the walls, moving through the crowd with lights and basins and messages, while the great ones could only sit and wait. The state apartments at 2 a.m, those last nights of August, look like a battlefield after a victory nobody wanted. Candles burn to stubs in the chandeliers, wax hanging in frozen ropes. Courtiers asleep in their clothes on benches, on the floor against the walls. A marquise with her head on her maid's shoulder, both of them open-mouthed, a Marshal of France snoring in a window seat with his wig in his lap like a sleeping cat. The card tables abandoned mid-game, hands of lansquenet lying face down where they were dropped 3 days ago, because even gambling, the true religion of this court, has finally stopped. The air is used up, breathed 1,000 times, thick with cold candle smoke and sleeping bodies, and the wilting orange trees in their silver tubs, and through it all, threading between the sleepers, the servants move with their small lights like fish through a drowned cathedral, and nobody sends you on false errands anymore, and nobody curses you, and perhaps has stopped shouting entirely, which is the most frightening thing that has happened all year. Twice a day the bulletins are read to the crowd, and the crowd, dukes and lackeys pressed together, listens with one face. The leg is opened by the surgeons, and the news of what they find inside travels the palace like a shudder. The mortification is to the bone. The bone. There is nothing to amputate toward. The death has climbed past the knee, past cutting. The doctors, out of medicine, out of pride, finally out of hope, do the thing that tells everyone the truth louder than any bulletin. They let a stranger in. A peasant remedy man from Provence, some say Marseille, appears out of nowhere with an elixir, and the greatest physicians of Europe, who a month ago would not have let this man hold their horses, stand aside and let him dose the King of France, because why not? Because nothing. Because the ocean has no more medicine in it. The elixir is mostly wine. For a day the king seems stronger, rallies, eats 2 little biscuits soaked in it, and the whole palace, 10,000 people, allows itself 6 hours of insane hope. Hope like a fever, men weeping and laughing in the galleries, and then the pulse fades again, and the black climbs higher, and the hope goes out the way it came, all at once, leaving everyone emptier than before it visited. And in the middle of the last week you see the thing that you will tell your grandchildren about, the thing that historians will still be writing down 300 years later, and you see it because you are holding a door. They bring him the child, the little Dauphin, his great-grandson, 5 years old, the boy who is about to be Louis XV, is carried into the bedchamber on the arms of his governess to say goodbye, and you are stationed at the door of the anteroom, and the procession passes you close enough to touch. The governess in black, and on her arm a small grave boy in ribbons, dark-eyed, beautiful, frightened, sucking 2 fingers, being carried toward the smell. And through the open doors, in the half-drawn light of the great bed, you see the old king raise himself, the ruin of the handsomest man in Europe, and you hear him. Everyone in 3 rooms hears him, the voice weak but pitched to carry the way it was trained to carry 70 years ago. Speak to the child across the bed's edge, across 5 reigns worth of years. Mignon, you are going to be a great king. Do not imitate me in my love of building, nor in my love of war. Try to remain at peace with your neighbours. Relieve your people as much as you can, and do all the things I was unfortunate enough not to do. Do all the things I was unfortunate enough not to do. The man who built the palace you are standing in, apologizing for it, to a 5-year-old, in front of witnesses, on his deathbed. The child begins to cry. The governess carries him out quickly, past you again, and the little boy stares at your torch as he passes, at the flame, the way children stare at flames. His cheeks wet, 2 fingers in his mouth, King of France in a week, and the door closes, and you stand there holding your light with your dead trained eyes pointed at the middle distance, while something in your chest folds and refolds itself like a letter nobody will ever be allowed to read. After that, the days are only breath. He says his goodbyes methodically, a king to the end, in order of protocol. The princes, the princesses, the household. He has the courtiers admitted in a body and asked their pardon. Pardon for the bad examples he's given, and men who have spent their lives lying to him for advantage stand at the balustrade you once stood beside and sob like children, and some of it is even real. He gives instructions for his heart, for his entrails, for his funeral, dryly, precisely, as if dictating arrangements for a journey to Fontainebleau. He tells his valets, who cannot stop weeping around him, the sentence the whole world will repeat. Why do you weep? Did you think me immortal? Did you think me immortal? And here is the terrible answer you've learned in 2 years and 7 months of sleeping in the wall of his house. Yes, yes, they did. All of them. That was the whole point of the palace. Every fountain, every mirror, every rule about candlesticks and stools and who hands whom a shirt, all of it was one vast machine for making one man seem permanent, for making his body into the sun, and the sun does not have a leg that turns black. The sun is not marinated in Burgundy by frightened old doctors. The sun does not apologize to a crying child. 10,000 people built their lives inside the belief, and the belief is dying upstairs at the rate of an inch a day, and there is nothing in the etiquette, nothing in all of ceremony that tells anyone what to do about it except what the machine always does. Keep performing. Lay the fires. Announce the meat. Hold the light steady. On the last day of August the death agony begins, and the priests take over the sounds of the palace. The prayers for the dying, murmured in relays through the night, seeping out of the state bedchamber and down the enfilades, so that you hear Latin now under everything, under the wind in the chimneys, under the fountain's ghost drip in the walls, under your own footsteps on the marble. He's unconscious by evening mostly, surfacing now and then to join the prayers in a voice they say is suddenly, eerily strong, the trained voice outliving the man. The whole palace stays up with him. You stay up with him. There is no order to do so. You and Colin simply do not lie down. Nobody lies down. You sit on the stairs of the service passage in the dark, shoulder to shoulder with a boy from Picardy, listening to Latin come through the walls of Versailles, and at some point in the smallest hours Colin falls asleep against your arm, 14 years old, mouth open, and you let him. You sit perfectly still for 2 hours so a frightened boy can sleep, and it is the only useful thing anyone in the entire palace does that night. At 8:15 in the morning, on the 1st of September 1715, 4 days short of his 77th birthday, in the 73rd year of his reign, the longest reign in the history of Europe, longer than any before it, longer than any after it, in his great bed at the exact centre of everything, the Sun King stops. You are carrying water when it happens. Of course you are. You're on the service stair with 15 kilos of copper, can dragging your right arm long, and the sound reaches you before the news does. A sound you have never heard the palace make. A kind of vast, soft exhalation. The sound of 10,000 people in one building, all learning the same fact within 90 seconds. Doors, footsteps, a single high cry from somewhere. Then voices, hundreds of voices rising together through the stone like water rising, and you stand on the stair with your can, and the water's surface shivers in rings from your own pulse, and you think, with a clarity you will never achieve again about anything. The lake has gone dry. Every fish in France is about to learn what air is, and then, because you are you, and because a world is what it is, you carry the water up. It is needed for washing the body, even that, even now, especially now. Here is what nobody tells you about the death of a king. It is the busiest day of everyone's life. You imagined, if you ever imagined it at all, silence, stillness, a palace kneeling. And there is a moment of that first vast exhalation, 90 seconds when Versailles forgets to breathe. And then the machine, which has never once stopped in 50 years, reveals that it has a gear even for this, that it has always had a gear for this, and the gear engages, and the day becomes a storm of work with you inside it. Because a dead king is not a dead man. A dead king is a legal event, a religious event, a theatrical production, and a logistical catastrophe all at once, and every part of it lands on the backs of the household. The etiquette of royal death is older than the palace, older than the dynasty, and it unrolls now like a carpet nobody has unrolled in 72 years, with old men consulting old books to be sure of steps that no living person has performed. The body must be watched, prayed over, opened, yes, opened. The custom is ancient and absolute. The king is autopsied before his court the following day, his heart taken to go to the Jesuits in Paris in a case of gold and vermeil, his entrails to Notre Dame, the body itself embalmed for Saint-Denis, the king divided like the kingdom he held together. And the surgeons who do this work require tables, linens, basins, spirits, candles, and boys to carry all of it. And one of the boys is you, and there are things you carry down that back stair on the 2nd of September that you will place very deep in the place where you keep things, and we will leave them there together, you and I, because some doors even a story should not open. What I will tell you about is the sound of the palace at first day, because the sound is the honest record. The bells begin at Versailles and spread outward, parish by parish, across the whole kingdom, a slow tolling that will not fully stop for weeks, so that everything that happens now happens inside bronze. Under the bells the galleries roar, not with grief, with business. The court is dissolving and reforming in real time like a startled flock. Everyone who matters is already calculating the road to Paris, because the new king is 5 years old, and the regent will rule from Paris, and by afternoon the courtyards are jammed with carriages loading, whole households packing in hours what took years to install, tapestries coming off walls, plate going into straw, servants staggering under trunks, horses screaming, wheels on cobbles, and through the middle of it the priests still relaying their Latin around the body upstairs, and the two sounds together, the prayers and the packing, are the truest sentence anyone has ever composed about the court of France. And the faces, you will remember the faces. Some courtiers weep, and some of the weeping is real. Old men who served him 50 years standing against walls with their hats off, wrecked, unashamed. But many faces wear something else, poorly hidden or not hidden at all, and the word for it, though it takes you years to admit it, is relief. Release. The schoolmaster is dead. The endless rain, the endless ceremony, the endless standing, the etiquette that governed every hour of every life in this building, the old man's eye that missed nothing, all of it lifted in a single morning, and men of 60 who have never in their lives chosen their own bedtime walk. The galleries looking stunned, like prisoners holding their own file. In Paris you will hear soon enough it is worse. The people, taxed and starved and bled by his wars for a generation, do not even pretend. When his funeral procession passes in the dark towards Saint-Denis a week from now, taking the back way at night to avoid the crowds, avoiding, on the advice of men who know, the full royal route, the people of Paris will line the road anyway, and they will not kneel, some of them, they will sing. They will curse the coffin and drink and jeer and set up little tents along the way as if for a fair. 72 years of sun, and the kingdom's answer, at the end, whispered where the guards can't hear. Good riddance to the old man, and God save the little one. You hear about the jeering from a coachman later, and you wait to feel something simple about it, outrage or agreement, and neither comes. What comes instead is the coucher, the hiss of breath through the old man's nose as they lifted his ruined leg, instantly mastered, in front of 100 watching enemies, and the small boy with wet cheeks staring at your torch, and do all the things I was unfortunate enough not to do, and you understand at 17, standing in a stripped corridor holding someone's rolled-up tapestry, a thing about the world that most people are spared forever, that a man can be a catastrophe and a marvel in the same body, that the palace and the swamp under it are the same place, and that the people singing by the coffin and the old valets crying against the walls are both telling the truth. On the third day, in the chamber where you once held the torch, the ceremony happens that you will describe to your grandchildren last, after all the rest, because it is the one that still raises the hair on your arms, the proclamation. The captain of the bodyguard steps to the balcony rail above the marble court, over the heads of the crowd, and calls out 3 times, in a voice trained like the dead man's voice to carry to the edges of a kingdom, "Le roi est mort." The king is dead. And then, in the same breath, the same voice, without a pause for the world to end in. The old formula that is the whole theory of France in 6 words, the formula that means the man dies, and the crown does not touch the ground, not even for a second, not even for him. Vive le roi, vive le roi, vive le roi. And the crowd below takes it up, and the cannon fire, and somewhere in a nursery a 5-year-old who likes to watch torch flames is now the most powerful child on earth. And upstairs the machine is already turning toward him. Because the machine serves the office, not the man. It has only ever served the office, and every fire you've ever laid, every can of water, every step on every stair, you laid and carried and climbed for a thing that cannot die, wearing a man who could. That night, for the first time since August, the palace sleeps. All of it, all at once, a whole exhausted world falling over like a dropped coat. Courtiers sleep, guards sleep, the kitchens bank their fires and sleep. You lie on your cot in your slot between the walls, 30 meters from an empty bed at the centre of everything, and the silence on the other side of the wall is a new kind of silence, a silence with a shape, the shape of a breathing you had stopped noticing and now cannot stop missing, and you think you will lie awake all night inside that shape, and you are wrong. Sleep takes you in 4 minutes, the deep black dreamless sleep of the survivor, and the palace holds you, and the walls do not rustle, and even the rats, you would swear it, even the rats are quiet. You get 9 hours. 9. It is the single longest sleep of your entire service, and you will never forget the number, because it was his gift. The only thing the Sun King ever gave you directly, and he had to die to give it. And then, in the space of 9 days, the impossible thing happens, the thing that no one in your lifetime believed possible, the thing the building itself was built to prevent. Versailles empties. The regent takes the little king to Vincennes on the far side of Paris for his health, they say, for the good air, and where the king goes, the court goes, because the court is not a place, the court is a swarm, and the swarm follows the crown the way bees follow a queen, and the crown is 5 years old and riding away down the Paris road in a carriage with his governess, waving, they say, at the crowds, delighted, they say, by the cannon. Behind him, in a column that takes days to fully pass, goes everything. The households, the ministers, the councils, the wardrobe, the plate, the musicians, the mistresses of men whose fathers' mistresses arrived here in the same wagons 40 years ago. The road to Paris is a river of furniture, and each morning the palace around you is lighter, quieter, colder, like a body cooling, and each morning fewer fires need laying, 18, then 11, then 6, and the strangeness of that, of your own aching knees being given back to you a fireplace at a time, is the strangeness of the whole month made physical. Nobody needs you to run at night any more. Nobody, very much, needs you at all. The household of the dead king is dissolved by degrees, pensioned, reassigned, released, and the palace keeps only a skeleton service, caretakers, guards, a handful of officers, and because Perrault puts your name on a list without ever telling you why, because perhaps in his grey, hinge-voiced heart he noticed a boy who held a torch steady through the end of the world, you're kept on, garçon of an empty palace, servant of a house whose master is a 5-year-old 60 kilometres away who may not come back for years, and whisper the knowing ones may never come back at all, because the regent hates Versailles. Everyone knows the regent hates Versailles. The sensible money says the court has left this cold marble mountain forever, and France will be ruled from Paris now like a normal kingdom, and the greatest palace on earth will stand out here in its gardens like a crown in a field slowly filling with dust. So now let me show you the thing that almost no one alive got to see, the sight that is yours alone, your strange inheritance, your wage for 2 years and 7 months of sleeping in a wall. Versailles empty in October. You walk the state apartments in the late afternoon with a ring of keys and a lantern, because checking the rooms is a duty now, and the duty is yours, and your footsteps are the only footsteps. The parquet that roared like applause under 1,000 heels gives up each of your steps one at a time, tock, and the sound travels down the enfilade through 7 open doorways and comes back to you smaller. The furniture is under sheets. The chandeliers are bagged in linen against the dust, hanging overhead in the gloom like cocoons, like strange fruit. And the mirrors are the worst and the best of it. You come into the Galerie des Glazes at the hour when the low sun comes straight up the Grand Canal, straight up the axis, the way the whole landscape was aimed, and the light floods the empty gallery, 73 metres of gold and glass with not one living soul in it but you, and 17 arched mirrors hold 17 small servants in blue, each one carrying his little lantern through a corridor of fire, and you stand in the middle of the most famous room in the world, which is yours now, all yours. 7 o'clock, sun and silence and dust turning in the light in slow galaxies, and you say your own name out loud, Nicholas Guérin, just to hear a voice in it, and the gallery takes your name and stretches it and hands it back, and you laugh, and it stretches the laugh too, and then you stop laughing because the room has begun softly to frighten you. Because an empty Versailles is not a peaceful place. It is a held breath. Every object in it is waiting. The clocks are still wound. That is one of your duties too, and they tick in the shrouded rooms and strike the hours to nobody. Small silver voices counting for the furniture. The fountains are dry and the basins fill with leaves, and the gardeners still rake the gravel of avenues no one walks, because the machine, even reduced to a skeleton, does not know how to stop. The machine performs for an audience of statues. At night the cold comes back into the stone like a tenant reclaiming rooms, and the building talks to itself, ticks and knocks and long groans as the great timbers settle, and the wind gets in among the 2,000 windows and plays them like an instrument, and you lie on your cot in your same slot in the wall. You could have any room in the north attics now. Perrault said so himself. And you tried one night, a real room with a real window, and you could not sleep in all that space. You lay there feeling like a knife left out of its drawer, and by midnight you were back in your slot between the walls with your thin brown blanket, at home. And if you think that is a sad detail, you are wrong, and if you think it is a happy one, you are also wrong, and the fact that it is both is the whole education Versailles has written into you. You visit the king's bedchamber once a week with the concierge to air it. The bed is still there behind the balustrade at the exact centre of everything, stripped and shrouded, at the crossing point of avenues where nobody rides, facing east windows where the sun still rises up the road from Paris every morning and comes in and falls on empty linen. You stand at the spot 1 pace left of the balustrade where you held the torch, and the marks are still on the back of your right hand, faint white commas of old wax scald, and you find that you always fall silent in this room, and so does the concierge, an old soldier not given to silence, and neither of you ever says why. And one afternoon in late October, on the service stair, you meet Bontemps, old Bontemps, pensioned now, come back one last time to collect some papers and say goodbye to 68 years of his life, and he stops on the landing and looks at you, kept on, key-carrying, wall-sleeping, 17, and he says, "So, you're what's left." And you say, "Yes, monsieur." And he looks past you, up the stair, toward the state floor, toward all of it, the mirrors and the shrouds and the ticking clocks, and something moves across his old face like wind across water, and he says quietly, not really to you, "We used to say the king was the sun. Silly, we knew it was silly. We said it anyway, every day for 50 years, until it stopped being silly and became simply the weather." He gathers himself, straightens, 40 years of court in his spine. "Well, the weather has changed, boy. Keep the clocks wound. He'll be back, this new little one, or his son will. Houses like this are never empty forever. And when they come back, everything will be ready, and no one will ever know it was dark here. And no one will ever know your name." He puts one dry hand on your shoulder, the second kind gesture of his life. "That is the service, Nicola. That was always the whole of the service. Ready rooms and no name. Some men can't bear it. I think perhaps you can." He goes down the stair, slowly, 1 step at a time, and out through the wood court, and you never see him again. And he was right, by the way, about all of it. In 7 years, the little king, grown to 12, will come back, and the court will pour into the palace again like water into a dry fountain, and the fires and the ceremonies and the 10,000 exhausted lives will resume as if they had never paused. And it will all run on for 3 more generations until the October morning in 1789, when a very different crowd comes up that same road from Paris and takes a very different king away down it, and the palace empties for good. But that is far away, 3 lifetimes away, another story for another night. Tonight, in the autumn of 1715, there is only you and the keys and the held breath of the most beautiful building on earth, waiting in its gardens for the sun to come back. Winter comes to the empty palace, and the winter of 1715 teaches you the last lessons, the quiet ones, the ones that only come to a mind that has finally been allowed to rest. Because you are sleeping now, Nicholas. That is the strangest gift of the whole strange year. For the first time since you walked up the avenue from Chartres with your sack over your shoulder, your nights belong to you. The skeleton service keeps honest hours, fires at dawn, rounds at dusk, and between dusk and dawn nothing, no bells, no notes, no torchlit vigils, only the enormous dark house folding itself around its handful of keepers like a sleeping dog around fleas. And your body, your poor mistrained 17-year-old body, takes almost a month to believe it. For weeks you snap awake at 2, at 3, at 4:30, heart pounding, listening for the hand on your shoulder, for Thévenot's door, for Latin through the walls, and there is nothing. Only the wind in the 2,000 windows and the far-off strike of a clock counting for the furniture, and slowly, night by night, like a fist unclenching one finger at a time, you learn what everyone else learned in the cradle. You learn to sleep like a person. And with sleep comes thinking, real thinking, the kind you never had fuel for before. And on the long winter evenings in the caretaker's room off the wood court, with a fire you are actually permitted to sit beside, a fire for you, your own knees warming at your own flames for the first time in nearly 3 years, you find yourself laying the whole palace out in your mind like a man laying out tools and looking at what you know. You know now that Versailles was never really a building. It was an argument. One man's argument made in stone and water and etiquette. That order could be forced onto the world, that a swamp could become the pattern book of Europe, that a wolfish nobility could be tamed with mirrors and candlesticks, that a single human body, dressed correctly and watched constantly, could hold together 20 million lives by ceremony alone. And the argument worked. That is the staggering thing. It worked for 50 years. It worked so well that the whole continent copied it. Kings from Spain to Sweden, building their own little Versailles, their own etiquettes, their own sons. And the price of the argument was paid in the currency you happen to be an expert in, the only currency you have ever had. Sleep. Bodies. The nights of 10,000 people burned like firewood decade after decade to keep one performance lit. The Duchess in her freezing attic and the boy in his wall and the king himself in his great bed at the centre. Watched even in his dreams, all of them feeding their nights into the machine, because the machine's one law, its only law, was that the performance must never stop, and performances devour exactly one thing, and that thing is rest. You think about the old man a great deal that winter, more than you expected to. You hold up what you saw, the hiss of mastered pain, the apology to the child. Why do you weep? Did you think me immortal against what the coachman told you? The singing by the coffin, the taxed and starving kingdom, the marsh fever graves under the gardens you love, and you give up, finally, gratefully, on making it come out even. It does not come out even. He was the most magnificent man of his age, and his age paid for the magnificence with its skin. And both of those facts will still be true in 300 years, and people will still be arguing about which one matters more, in books, in schoolrooms, in languages that do not exist yet, and not one of them, not one, will have stood where you stood, 6 feet away, holding the light, close enough to smell the truth. History will get the dates right and the treaties right, and it will never once know what you know. which is the sound a dying king's breath makes when a duke lifts his ruined leg, and how loud 100 silk courtiers can pretend. And you think about yourself, because a boy who sleeps 9 hours has time even for that. You take stock the way your father took stock of leather in the autumn, honestly, with your thumbs. Your right hand aches in the cold and always will. Your feet are ruined and rebuilt, harder than feet should be at 17. You can carry 30 kilos up 3 floors without changing your breathing. Read a corridor in the dark by smell. Gauge a great man's mood from the set of his valet shoulders at 40 paces. Stand for 6 hours without swaying. Lie without speaking. See without looking. And keep things in the place where things are kept forever without leaking. It is a strange dowry. It is not nothing. Boys are coming up the roads of France every day of every year with their sacks over their shoulders, and almost all of them will be devoured whole, and you were not devoured. You were annealed. Whatever the palace is, whatever it was for, it has made you into something the world can use hard without breaking. And in the world you were born into in the 18th year of your life and of the century, that is wealth, that is armour, that is more than most men are ever issued. 41 leaves in the stocking, 48 now. And you know, sitting by your first fire, listening to the wind work through the dark house above you like a tide through a wreck, that you will not stay forever. The court will come back some day, Bontemps said. So, and Bontemps was never wrong, and when it comes back it will bring the nights back with it. The notes at 2 in the morning, the torches, the burning of boys for light. And you have tasted sleep now, real sleep, the kind that belongs to you, and a man who has tasted that does not hand it back cheaply. Perhaps you will go to Paris, where everything is moving now, where the regent's new world is being born loud and disreputable and awake. Perhaps back toward Chartres, where a man who has kept the keys of Versailles could keep anything, could keep an inn with beds, and would know, better than any innkeeper in France, better than any innkeeper who ever lived, exactly what a bed is worth. Exactly what he was selling, because he spent 3 years of his one life finding out the hard way that the most beautiful palace on earth could mint gold and marshal armies and make water dance for a walking man, and could not, with all its power, in all its 700 rooms, reliably produce for the people inside it the one thing your mother's poorest neighbour had every single night of her life. A full night's sleep. That is the treasure, Nicolet. That was always the treasure. The whole gilded mountain was a monument to a man who was never once, from cradle to coffin, allowed to be alone in a dark room, resting. And you, the boy from the wall, the boy with no name in the ceremonies, you are lying here tonight in possession of the one luxury the Sun King himself was born too high to ever afford. Hold on to that thought. We're almost home now, you and I. The fire is low, the house is quiet. Let the last part of this story do what the last part of this story is for. It is a night in December, 1715, and you are going to bed. Follow yourself one last time, down the passage behind the wardrobe room, the passage exactly 1 metre wide, your shoulder brushing the cold plaster in the dark because your feet know every step and need no light. The cot, the straw mattress pressed thin by 2 years and 9 months of you. The brown blanket, thin in the middle where every blanket goes thin. You sit and you take off the left shoe first, always the left, easing it over the heel, and the deep hot pulse of your freed foot blooms and fades, and then the right, and then the stockings, and the cold air of the passage touches your bare feet like water, and it no longer hurts. Nothing tonight hurts more than it should. Your body is only tired now in the ordinary way, the good way, the way a body is meant to be tired at the end of a day of work it could carry. You lie back, you pull the blanket to your chin. The dark of the passage settles over you, total and familiar, the dark that has weight, and the weight is not a threat anymore. It has not been a threat for months. It is only a blanket over the blanket, and around you, above you, on every side of you, the empty palace of Versailles settles too. 700 rooms letting go of the day, timber by timber, stone by stone, the long groans and soft knocks of a great house talking itself down into the night. Listen to it with him. There's nothing in it now that needs you. The clocks are wound. You wound them yourself this afternoon. Walk in the shrouded rooms with the little key, and now they tick in the dark for the furniture. Patient silver, keeping time for no one, keeping it anyway. Let them keep it. Time is their work tonight. It is not yours. The fires are out. Every hearth you have ever knelt at is cold and swept and ready. 22 of them, 100 of them, dark mouths in dark rooms, holding tomorrow's kindling in neat tents, waiting without impatience, because stone knows how to wait. Let them wait. The fires are tomorrow's work. They are not tonight's. The keys hang on their board by the caretaker's room, every door of the great house locked or sleeping, and the guards at the gates lean on their halberds under the winter stars, and the gardens lie out there in the dark in their perfect frozen geometry. 200,000 trees standing at attention for nobody, gravel raked, basins still, the god Apollo and his horses resting under a skin of ice in their dry fountain, mid-leap forever, going nowhere, in no hurry at all. Everything is ready. That was the service, the old man said. Ready rooms and no name. And everything is ready, Nicholas. You can stop now. So let the palace grow softer around you. Let the hall of mirrors hold its 17 sleeping arches of moonlight with no one to reflect. Let the shrouded chandeliers hang in their linen cocoons, dreaming of candles. Let the great bed at the centre of everything lie empty and smooth in the dark, facing east, where the sun will rise up the road from Paris tomorrow, whether any king is watching or not, because the sun, the real one, the old one, was never anybody's emblem, and rises for harness makers' sons exactly as it rises for anyone. Let the wind have the 2,000 windows. It knows them all by now. It has been learning them for 50 years. That long low sound in the seams of the building is not a warning and not a voice. It is only December crossing a hilltop in France, the same December that is crossing your village near Chartres tonight, moving over your mother's roof, over the church, over the fields lying open and black and patient under the frost. The same wind stitching the whole dark country together, palace and village, king and kitchen, one cold, clean thread through everything. And let the people sleep, all of them, everywhere, the whole exhausted kingdom. The little king in his bed at Vincennes, 5 years old, watched over, growing. The old valets in their pensioned rooms, the coachmen, the fountaineers, the gardeners, the women of the wardrobe, Colin somewhere out there in a new household, 14 and learning, all the 10,000 scattered servants of the machine lying down tonight in 10,000 different darknesses. Every one of them owed years of rest. Every one of them collecting a little of the debt tonight. The dead too, if you like. Even him. Especially him. 72 years on duty, and relieved at last off in the dark of Saint-Denis with all the other kings, in the one bedchamber where nobody watches, nobody enters, and the ceremony is finally, mercifully over. "Did you think me immortal?" he asked them. "No one is. That is not sad news, not tonight, not down here at the bottom of the day. It is the kindest fact there is. It is the reason rest exists. Your breathing has slowed. Feel it. The blanket rises and falls smaller each time, and the cold of the passage stays politely outside the wool, and the straw beneath you has given up its last rustle and gone still, and your feet are warm now, your hands are heavy now, your burned old wax marks and your aching knuckles and your black bruised toenail are all just quiet, distant countries reporting nothing. Somewhere far above you a clock strikes, silver, unhurried, counting an hour you're too tired to count with it. Let it count alone. It likes the work. Centuries will pass, Nicola. The palace over your head will fill and empty and fill again. The gardens will grow and be cut and grow. The mirrors will hold revolutions and restorations and tourists in strange clothes with lights in their hands, millions of them, come to walk the gallery where you once said your own name to the dust. The world will change past all recognition, machines and wonders, the fountains running all day for everyone, no whistles, no secrets, and not one person in all those crowds will know that a boy slept here, in this wall, in this slot, in the winter after the sun went down. But every night, forever, people will do exactly what you're doing now. They will finish the day's carrying. They will take off their shoes, the left one first, some of them. They will lie down in the dark in their own narrow, warm places, in palaces and villages and cities hanging with lights, and they will feel the day loosen its grip finger by finger, and the dark will settle over them with its familiar weight, and they will let go. Some things don't change. The need for rest at the end of the long day, that doesn't change. It is older than kings. It will outlast every crown ever made, so let it come. Let sleep rise up around you the way the night rises up around a great house, room by room, floor by floor, gently putting out the lights. Let the corridors go. Let the staircases go. Let the mirrors go dark one arch at a time. Let the day's weight slide off your shoulders like the strap of the wood carrier, lifted away, gone. Let your thoughts slow and soften and scatter like the dust in the evening sun of the long gallery, drifting, golden, settling. You carried everything they gave you. You held the light steady. You kept the rooms ready. You've earned this. You, exactly you, listening in your own dark at the end of your own long day. The palace is quiet. The kingdom is quiet. The clock counts on, alone and content, and the wind crosses the hilltop, and the boy in the wall breathes slower and slower and slower still. Take your rest now, and dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.